Senator Wright. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. Yes, I seek leave to take note of the response of Rear Admiral Ken Doolan, Chairman of the Australian War Memorial Council, to the Senate motion of 20 March 2013 in relation to Australian peacekeepers.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted. Senator Wright.
Thank you. Peacekeepers have been proudly representing Australia in conflict zones since 1947, when 4 Australians first went to Indonesia as part of the UN Good Officers Commission to assist with the transition from Dutch colonial rule. Since then, more than 66,000 Australians have been proudly involved in over 60 United Nations and multinational peacemaking and peacekeeping operations in support of global peace and security. It's a proud record. These postings have included the Iran-Iraq border in the lead-up to the First Gulf War, Western Sahara, Papua New Guinea at the height of the civil war in Bougainville, Rwanda and Kosovo, among many others. Again, names of conflicts and conflict zones that often evoke understandings of some horror. Peacekeepers and peacemakers are regular members of the Australian Defence Force, or members of the Military Reserve Forces, or members of the Australian Federal Police. All 3 services have made a fine contribution. Contrary to what their name suggests, peacekeepers are most needed where peace is most tenuous. They often walk a delicate line, trying to keep warring factions apart and protect civilians, while exercising enormous restraint under strict rules of engagement that only allow them to use their weapons in very limited circumstances. It has been likened to trying to manage in a conflict zone with one arm tied behind your back. It's a fraught and dangerous business, and the risk of conflict or danger is never far away. Since 1947, 48 members of our Defence Forces, our Australian Defence Forces, have died while serving as peacekeepers for Australia. Although they died whilst deployed on peacekeeping, humanitarian and disaster relief operations, up until very recently, their names were not recorded on the honour roll reserved for other ADF deaths. Peacekeepers and their families felt this deeply. The lack of recognition made them feel their service was not valued, and indeed the families felt that their loved ones' deaths were rendered meaningless. But this has now changed. This year, after a long campaign by the Australian Peacekeeper and Peacemaker Veterans Association, the APPVA, and families of those who have died, the Australian War Memorial Council made a historic decision to allow ADF peacekeepers' names to be listed on the honour roll. As Rear Admiral Doolan's response states, and I quote, "This decision reflects the changing nature of modern military operations and wider community perspective." There is no doubt that the role of peacekeepers and peacemakers will become increasingly important in minimising global conflict and maintaining peace this century. I commend the Australian War Memorial Council for recognising that times have changed and for being willing to respond to that change to bring about a just outcome. Soon, the families of those 48 who have died will be able to find their names on the Roll of Honour and leave a poppy in remembrance. The Australian Greens have been very privileged to be part of this campaign. From the time I was first approached by the APPVA, it struck me as only fair and right to properly recognise the honourable and important work our peacekeepers do on our behalf. They do us proud. When it comes to members of the Australian Defence Forces, I have a simple philosophy. If we're willing to ask people to serve and take risks on our behalf, then we must take full responsibility for that, as a parliament, as a government, as a country. We must acknowledge their service properly, take full responsibility for what we ask of them, and look after them and their families if they are injured or killed. When we fittingly reflect on the sacrifices that so many have made for our country in the field of war, it's very important that we also honour those who have died in the pursuit of peace.
Thank you, Senator Wright.